Well, Noah, what would you say girls find appealing about you?
Well, sir, I'm a plain man, but if forced to choose a quality, I'd say my skill at mending a harness.
Well, it's always the quiet ones who are into the kinky stuff, huh?
Teddy, I will be in a play. You understand? Performing? I'm not opposed to eat the Legos. Oh, God, it's like talking to Keanu Reeves.
You're right on time, Lamekins. Make yourself a drink, baby.
No, thanks, Dutch.
Who are you, and how did you get in here?
I'm the locksmith. And I'm the locksmith.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about a show that disappeared? Not one that had a grand finale, but one that was there one week and gone the next, leaving you with a handful of perfect episodes and a sense of unfinished business. This is a tribute to those ghosts of the airwaves, the beloved short-lived comedies that were gone too soon but never forgotten. 1. Action.
Nobody loves you, Peter. That means that you are going to have to do something very public, very generous, and totally altruistic.
Public and generous I can do. Altruistic I'm not so sure about.
Why not?
I don't know what that means.
Picture this, a ruthless, foul-mouthed, and completely amoral movie producer, played by the hilariously manic Jay Moore, trying to claw his way back to the top of Hollywood after his latest big-budget action flick bombs spectacularly. This was Action, a Fox sitcom that premiered in the late 90s and was so far ahead of its time, it's not even funny. Well, actually, it was hilarious, darkly, cynically, and brilliantly so. The show was a scathing satire of the movie business, packed with inside jokes, celebrity cameos playing twisted versions of themselves, including Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, and dialogue so sharp and profane it had to be bleeped for network television. It was smart, it was edgy, and it was like nothing else on TV. Moore's character, Peter Dragon, was an unforgettable anti-hero, a monster you somehow couldn't help but root for. The wild part is, the show was co-created by Chris Thompson, a veteran of classic sitcoms like Laverne and Shirley, but its tone was pure, uncut cynicism, more akin to an HBO series than a network comedy. It pulled no punches in its depiction of Hollywood's greed and absurdity. Unfortunately, its genius was also its downfall. The show's relentless cynicism and inside baseball humor, while beloved by critics, failed to connect with a mainstream audience. Fox, seemingly terrified of the monster it had created, aired the episodes out of order, and then canceled it after just 8 of the 13 produced episodes had aired. This ahead-of-its-time masterpiece was a critical darling that never found its audience, but our next show was a bona fide hit with a massive following that was canceled for a completely different and much more controversial reason. 2. Roseanne.
You still want to go back for Fisher? Well, I'll get in my car and I'll drive you over there to him myself. No, you wouldn't. Okay, I lied.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. Roseanne wasn't canceled too soon. It ran for 9 seasons and was one of the biggest shows ever. And you're right, but we're not talking about the original run. We're talking about the revival. When Roseanne returned to the airwaves, it was a television earthquake. The premiere pulled in over 18 million viewers, a staggering number in the modern streaming era. It was an instant, bona fide smash hit, proving that America was hungry to reconnect with the Connor family. The show deftly handled modern political and social issues with the same blunt, working-class humor that made the original a classic. It was a ratings juggernaut, the #1 show on television, and was quickly renewed for another season. And then everything flips upside down. Star and creator Roseanne Barr posted a racist tweet, and the fallout was immediate and catastrophic. ABC, faced with an unprecedented scandal, made the shocking decision to cancel its #1 show outright. The move was a stunning display of corporate conviction, leaving the cast, crew, and millions of fans reeling. You won't believe what came next. In a brilliant and bizarre pivot, the network decided to kill off Roseanne's character and retool the show as the Connors. This new version has gone on to have a successful run of its own, but the original revival of Roseanne remains a bizarre footnote. A show that was a massive, undeniable success, yet was canceled after just 9 episodes due to the self-inflicted actions of its own star. The revival of Roseanne was a modern television soap opera, but our next entry takes us back to the 90s for a cult classic about high school life that was adored by critics and its small, devoted fan base. 3. Freaks and Geeks.
Then what happens when they come home and see my head is fine?
Well, we'd have to hit you over the head and give you a bump.
There has never been a show that captured the awkward, painful, and hilarious reality of high school life better than Freaks and Geeks. Set in the early 80s, this one-season wonder from creator Paul Feig and executive producer Judd Apatow was a masterful blend of comedy and drama. It followed the lives of 2 groups of students at a Michigan high school: the Freaks, a burnout crew of stoners and rebels, and the Geeks, a trio of nerdy freshmen navigating the treacherous waters of their first year. The show was authentic, heartfelt, and painfully relatable. It didn't rely on cheap jokes or sitcom tropes. It found humor in the small, everyday tragedies and triumphs of being a teenager. Just when it all seemed figured out, and the show was building a dedicated following and earning rave reviews, NBC completely fumbled it. The network seemed baffled by the show's subtle, character-driven humor. They aired episodes erratically, constantly changing its time slot and putting it on long hiatuses, making it impossible for a loyal audience to find it. The real shocker was still to come. The cast was a murderer's row of future superstars. We're talking Seth Rogen, James Franco, Jason Segel, Linda Cardellini, Busy Phillips, and Martin Starr, all in their very first major roles. NBC had a goldmine of talent on its hands and had no idea. They canceled the show after just 12 of its 18 episodes had aired, a decision that is now widely regarded as one of the single biggest blunders in television history. Freaks and Geeks launched a dozen superstars, but our next show, from the same creative mind, was an equally brilliant look at the trials of post-college life that also met a premature end. 4. Undeclared.
You gonna work?
Yes, I'll work.
Say it again.
I'm gonna work?
I like your hair.
Thanks.
Not really. I'm just saying that because I'm your father.
After the heartbreaking cancellation of Freaks and Geeks, Judd Apatow returned to television with Undeclared, a show that felt like a spiritual sequel. This time, the setting was a college dorm, and the focus was on a group of freshmen navigating their first year away from home. Like its predecessor, Undeclared was a perfect blend of laugh-out-loud comedy and genuine, heartfelt emotion. It perfectly captured the excitement, confusion, and anxiety of being on your own for the first time. The show starred a host of talented young actors, including Jay Bruchel, Carla Gallo, and Seth Rogen, returning from Freaks and Geeks. The cast also featured a who's who of future comedy stars in recurring roles, including Jason Segel, Charlie Hunnam, and Amy Poehler. It all boils down to this one twist. Apatow, having learned a hard lesson from his experience with NBC, tried to make Undeclared more accessible for its new home on Fox. The episodes were more self-contained, the humor a bit broader, but it never sacrificed its emotional core. The show was smart, funny, and instantly relatable to anyone who had ever lived in a dorm. Unfortunately, lightning struck twice. Despite being a critical darling, Fox gave Undeclared the same treatment NBC gave Freaks and Geeks. It was bounced around the schedule, poorly promoted, and ultimately canceled after one brilliant season. Apatow would go on to become one of the most powerful comedy producers in Hollywood, but his 2 early television masterpieces remain painful reminders of what could have been. Apatow's early shows were victims of network mismanagement, but our next sitcom was a clever, high-concept comedy from a master of the genre that was simply too weird for its time. 5. Police Squad.
You're right on time, Lamekins. Make yourself a drink, baby.
No, thanks, Etch.
Who are you, and how did you get in here?
I'm the locksmith. And I'm the locksmith.
Before the Naked Gun movies became blockbuster comedy classics, there was Police Squad, the television show that started it all. From the minds of the comedy trio Zucker, Abrahams, and Zucker, the geniuses behind Airplane, this show was a relentless deadpan parody of classic cop dramas. Starring the wonderfully stone-faced Leslie Nielsen as Detective Frank Drebin, every single frame of the show was packed with sight gags, puns, and hilariously literal interpretations of cliches. The show was brilliantly stupid and stupidly brilliant, a masterclass in absurdist humor. Nobody saw this coming, but despite being one of the most joke-dense and cleverly written comedies ever produced, the network, ABC, had no idea what to make of it. The head of the network famously said that Police Squad was canceled because the viewer had to watch it in order to appreciate it. Yes, you read that right. The show was canceled because it demanded the audience's attention, the deadpan humor which required viewers to pay attention to the background gags and subtle wordplay, apparently flew right over the heads of network executives who were used to sitcoms with loud laugh tracks telling them when to laugh. After just 6 episodes, the show was axed. Thankfully, the story didn't end there. The creators took the character of Frank Drebin to the big screen, and The Naked Gun became a massive success, proving that audiences were more than smart enough to get the joke. Police Squad was too smart for its own good, but our next show was a charming and witty sitcom that was a critical darling but fell victim to the dreaded Friday night death slot. 6. Better Off Ted.
I had a great idea.
You should have come in here holding that bulb over your head so I could tell.
Yesterday, I was in my cubicle, and a fly got caught in my lamp, and it started to cook.
That's not really an idea. It's more of an unpleasant anecdote. Or a cautionary tale for flies.
Set in the morally bankrupt, soul-crushingly absurd world of the mega-corporation Viridian Dynamics, Better Off Ted was a workplace comedy unlike any other. The show starred Jay Harrington as Ted Crisp, a well-meaning executive trying to navigate a company that weaponized pumpkins, grew cowless beef in a lab, and developed an uncomfortably itchy office chair, all in the name of progress. The show was known for its whip-smart satirical writing and its unique gimmick of having Ted frequently break the fourth wall, speaking directly to the audience to comment on the insanity around him. Portia de Rossi was brilliant as his ruthlessly ambitious and emotionally detached boss. Veronica and the ensemble cast had a perfect comedic chemistry. Here's where it all takes a sharp turn. Despite being adored by critics who praised its clever writing and unique style, the show was consistently hampered by its network, ABC. It was given a terrible time slot, bounced around the schedule, and received almost no promotional support. It was a classic case of a network having a brilliant, critically acclaimed show on its hands and having absolutely no idea how to sell it to a wider audience. After 2 brilliant but low-rated seasons, the plug was pulled. In a final meta twist, the show even seemed to predict its own demise in an episode where Viridian Dynamics creates a TV commercial that is so effective it makes people buy products they don't even want. A level of marketing savvy the show itself was never afforded. Better Off Ted was a victim of bad marketing, but our next sitcom, a cult classic from the 90s, was a hilarious and surreal take on the superhero genre that never found a mainstream audience. 7. The Tick.
Empty your bladder of that bitter black urine men call coffee! It has its price, and that price has been paid!
Spoon. In the mid-90s, a giant, blue, and adorably clueless superhero burst onto the scene in the live-action version of The Tick. Based on the popular indie comic book, this show was a brilliant, deadpan satire of superhero tropes. Starring the hilarious Patrick Warburton in the title role, The Tick was a muscle-bound hero with superhuman strength, a childlike sense of wonder, and a penchant for delivering long, nonsensical speeches about justice. He was joined by his nebbish accountant sidekick, Arthur, who flew around in a moth suit. Together, they battled a bizarre rogues gallery of villains, including a woman named the Deadly Fin, who was, you guessed it, a woman with a fin on her head. The show was surreal, witty, and featured a pitch-perfect performance from Warburton, who seemed born to play the role. It was supposed to be easy, until it wasn't. The network, Fox, seemed utterly perplexed by the show's strange, deadpan humor. They buried it in a tough time slot and did little to promote it, ensuring that only a small, dedicated audience of comic book fans and comedy nerds would find it. After just 9 episodes, the show was canceled. You might think that's all, but wait. The Tick refused to die. Its cult following grew over the years, leading to an acclaimed animated series and eventually 2 more live-action reboots, proving that the demand for this big blue bug of justice was always there, even if the original network couldn't see it. The Tick was a cult hero who refused to die, but our next show was a heartwarming and funny sitcom that was canceled not once, but twice. 8 happy endings.
God, these girls look like Jane.
Yep. It's like they took the roof off a Tory Burch store and emptied it into this apartment.
What's Tory Burch?
She's a designer. It's kind of preppy boho chic meets up to... Are you sure you're gay?
Are you sure you're not gay?
A comedy about a group of 6 friends in Chicago whose lives are thrown into chaos when one of them leaves the other at the altar. Sound familiar? While the premise of happy endings might have seemed generic, the show itself was anything but. It was one of the fastest, funniest, and most joke-packed sitcoms of its era, a spiritual successor to shows like 30 Rock and Arrested Development. The ensemble cast, featuring Eliza Coupe, Elisha Cuthbert, Zachary Knighton, Adam Pally, Damon Wayans Jr., and Casey Wilson, had an electric improvisational chemistry that was pure magic. The dialogue was a rapid-fire barrage of pop culture references, witty banter, and hilarious non-sequiturs. The show was a critical darling and developed a fiercely loyal cult following. At first it looked harmless, but its network, ABC, seemed determined to kill it. For 3 seasons, the show was constantly moved around the schedule, making it a moving target for its own fans. In its 3rd season, it was banished to the dreaded Friday night death slot, a move that all but sealed its fate. After its cancellation, there was a massive fan outcry and a brief hopeful moment when other networks considered picking it up, but a deal never materialized. The show's premature demise is still lamented by comedy fans as a tragic case of a network simply not recognizing the brilliant gem it had. Happy Endings was a casualty of network shuffling, but our next sitcom was a sharp and funny look at the world of catering that was undone by backstage drama. 9. Party Down.
Sorry, my bad. I got it. Constance, will you get this man some fried chicken? Some appetizers that are not shrimp.
Are we having fun yet? This question, sarcastically uttered by a group of cater waiters in pink bow ties, was the recurring refrain of Party Down. This brilliant sitcom from Starz followed a team of aspiring Hollywood dreamers, writers, actors, and comedians who were stuck working for a catering company in Los Angeles, serving appetizers at the most bizarre and depressing parties imaginable. Each episode took place at a different event, from a Sweet 16 party to a corporate retreat to a funeral, providing a new backdrop for the characters' hilarious and often painful existential crises. The cast was a dream team of comedic talent, including Adam Scott, Ken Marino, Lizzie Kaplan, Martin Starr, and Jane Lynch. The writing was sharp, cynical, and painfully funny, a perfect send-up of the soul-crushing reality of chasing a dream in Hollywood. The deeper you look, the stranger it gets, because the show was a critical darling, winning an AFI award and developing a passionate cult following. But its ratings were low, and its future was always uncertain. And right when it seemed like the end, that's when the real story started. After 2 brilliant seasons, the show lost 2 of its main stars. Jane Lynch left for a little show called Glee, and Adam Scott was cast on Parks and Recreation. Faced with the loss of its 2 biggest names, the network decided to pull the plug. Thankfully, years later, the show's cult status led to a revival series, but for a long time, Party Down was a perfect, short-lived gem that was a victim of its own star's success. Party Down was a victim of its star's success, but our next entry was a brilliant animated sitcom that was a victim of its own network's impatience. 10. Clone High. Imagine a high school populated by the teenage clones of famous historical figures. Abraham Lincoln is a lanky, awkward romantic. Joan of Arc is a cynical goth girl. Mahatma Gandhi is a hyperactive party animal, and Cleopatra is the queen bee of the social scene. This was the brilliantly absurd premise of Clone High, an animated sitcom from the minds of Phil Lord, Christopher Miller, who would go on to direct the Lego Movie and 21 Jump Street, and Bill Lawrence, the creator of Scrubs. The show was a sharp, hilarious parody of teen dramas, packed with running gags, absurd situations, and a surprising amount of heart. The voice cast was stellar, and the writing was whip-smart. The wild part is, the show's initial run in the early 2000s was a complete disaster. In India, there were massive protests and a hunger strike over the show's depiction of Gandhi as a party-loving teenager. The controversy spooked the network, MTV, which had already given the show minimal promotional support. They quietly pulled the plug after just one season, leaving the story on a massive cliffhanger. For years, the show was a forgotten cult classic, passed around on bootleg tapes and online files. But its legend grew, and more than a decade later, it was revived for a new run on streaming, a testament to its enduring, weird, and wonderful genius. Clone High was too controversial for its time, but our next sitcom was a charming single-camera comedy that was simply too gentle for the cutthroat world of network television. 11th, Enlisted.
Where's my motorcycle, boy?
Come on, where could I hide a bright yellow motorcycle? It was in the tree.
In 2014, Fox rolled out a sitcom with a premise that was both surprisingly heartwarming and genuinely hilarious: Enlisted. The show centered on three brothers, all soldiers, stationed at a small Army base in Florida. The oldest, Sergeant Pete Hill, Jeff Stultz, is a decorated soldier demoted and sent stateside to a rear detachment unit, the soldiers left behind to take care of the base. There, he's forced to supervise his two younger goofball brothers, the sarcastic and cynical Corporal Derek Hill, Chris Lowell, and the sweet, naive, and overly enthusiastic Private Randy Hill, Parker Young. The show was a perfect blend of workplace comedy and family sitcom, with a sharp sense of humor and a deep well of respect for the military. Here's the twist. Creator Kevin Beagle based the show on his own relationship with his brothers and his experience with the military, giving it an authenticity that was rare for network television. Despite rave reviews from critics who praised its wit and heart, Fox seemed to have no idea how to handle it. They aired the episodes out of order, confusing the overarching narrative of Pete's recovery from his past trauma and his reconnection with his brothers. After a single brilliant season, the show was honorably discharged, leaving fans to wonder what could have been for this truly special comedy. 12. National T Strike Force, San Diego, Sport Utility Vehicle.
We're going to send San Diego a very special instant message. San Diego, you're dead. LOL.
A parody of every over-the-top procedural crime drama you've ever seen. National T Strike Force, San Diego, Sport Utility Vehicle was a glorious exercise in absurdity. Airing on Adult Swim, each 11-minute episode was a rapid-fire assault of action show cliches, terrible puns, and bizarre plot twists. The show starred the hilarious Paul Scheer as Agent Trent Hauser, the leader of a ridiculously elite anti-terrorist unit. The cast was a dream team of comedic talent, including Kate Mulgrew, Rebecca Roman, Martin Starr, and Rob Riggle. The show was a brilliant deconstruction of the genre, taking every trope, from the dramatic one-liners to the unnecessary explosions, and pushing it to its most illogical and hilarious conclusion. Here's where it all takes a sharp turn. Despite being a perfect fit for Adult Swim's brand of late-night insanity and developing a strong cult following, the show was canceled after just 3 seasons. The network never gave an official reason, but the decision was likely due to the rising costs of producing the show and the busy schedules of its increasingly famous cast. It was a short, brilliant, and explosive run, a show that burned twice as bright for half as long. Our next sitcom was a puppet-led parody of celebrity culture that was too sharp and too strange to survive. 13. The Grinder.
Dean, the answers are not out there. They're in here, brother. And you can find them with your shirt on.
Rob Lowe, as a self-absorbed actor who, after his long-running legal drama is canceled, moves back to his small hometown and believes his on-screen experience as a lawyer makes him qualified to work at his family's real law firm. That's the killer premise of The Grinder, a Fox sitcom that was one of the smartest and funniest shows of its time. Lowe played Dean Sanderson, the actor, with a perfect mix of charm and cluelessness, while Fred Savage was brilliant as his younger brother Stuart, a real-life, underappreciated attorney who has to deal with his brother's televised antics. The show was a clever satire of celebrity culture and legal dramas, with a sharp meta sense of humor. The deeper you look, the more brilliant it gets, as the show would often cut away to scenes from the fictional show within a show, also called The Grinder, which perfectly mimicked the over-the-top melodrama of legal procedurals. The show was a critical darling and even earned a Golden Globe nomination for Lowe. But it all came crashing down when, despite the acclaim, it struggled to find a large audience. Fox, in a move that baffled fans and critics alike, canceled the show after just 1 season. It remains a prime example of a show that was perhaps too clever and too niche for its own good, a legal comedy that was tragically overruled. 14. Pushing Daisies.
None on the run! None on the run! None on the run! Oh, we're so going to hell.
Imagine a world where a man has the power to bring the dead back to life with a single touch, but a second touch will kill them forever. This was the fantastical and visually stunning world of Pushing Daisies, a show that was part fairy tale, part romantic comedy, and part detective story. The show followed Ned Lee Pace, a pie maker with this incredible gift, who teams up with a private investigator to solve murders by briefly reviving the victims to ask them who killed them. The catch? He revives his childhood sweetheart, Chuck Anna Friel, but can never touch her again. The show was a burst of vibrant color and whimsical storytelling, unlike anything else on television. The dialogue was witty and fast-paced, and the world was filled with quirky, lovable characters. But the story takes a dark turn. The 2007 to 2008 Writers Guild of America strike hit the show hard, cutting its brilliant first season short. When it returned a year later, it had lost its momentum. The network ABC seemed to lose faith, and the show was canceled after its second season, leaving several plot lines unresolved. For a show all about second chances, it was a cruel irony that it never got one of its own. 15. The Ben Stiller Show.
Well, Noah, what would you say girls find appealing about you?
Well, sir, I'm a plain man, but if forced to choose a quality, I'd say my skill at mending a harness.
Well, it's always the quiet ones who are into the kinky stuff, huh?
Before he was a movie star, Ben Stiller had his own sketch comedy show on Fox, and it was a breeding ground for a generation of comedic talent. The Ben Stiller Show was a sharp, funny, and often surreal parody of pop culture, featuring brilliant sketches that spoofed everything from 90s action movies to classic sitcoms. The cast was a comedy nerd's dream. In addition to Stiller, it featured Andy Dick, Janine Garofalo, and Bob Odenkirk. The show's head writer was a young, unknown talent named Judd Apatow. The real shocker was still to come. Despite its incredible talent roster and its whip-smart writing, the show was a ratings disaster. Fox had no idea how to promote its quirky, pop culture-obsessed humor, and they canceled it after just 12 episodes. And then came the part nobody expected. Months after it was canceled, The Ben Stiller Show won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Writing, a final bittersweet validation of its brilliance. The show's legacy is immense. Its cast and writers would go on to define comedy for the next 2 decades, but its original run remains a classic example of a show that was simply too smart and too cool for the room. 16. Andy Richter controls the universe.
I took this course in how to defend myself with a hatchet. It's easier than you think.
Well, I guess the key is being the one with the hatchet.
Yeah, that's like unbelievably important.
After his successful run as Conan O'Brien's on-air sidekick, the hilarious Andy Richter was given his own sitcom, and it was a masterpiece of surreal single-camera comedy. Andy Richter Controls the Universe followed the life of an aspiring writer in Chicago, but it wasn't a standard sitcom. The show was famous for its cutaways to Andy's bizarre daydreams and fantasy sequences, a structural gimmick that was years ahead of its time and would later be popularized by shows like Scrubs. The writing was sharp, the humor was quirky and intelligent, and Richter was perfectly cast as the lovable, everyman hero navigating a world of oddball co-workers and strange situations. From the outside, it seemed simple, until you dig deeper. The show was adored by critics who praised its innovative format and clever writing. It even received an Emmy nomination. But its network, Fox, seemed to have no faith in it. The show was constantly preempted, moved around the schedule, and poorly promoted. Audiences never had a chance to find it and fall in love with its unique charm. After 2 short, brilliant seasons, it was canceled. It remains one of the great what-if stories of television comedy, a show that was doing things no one else was doing, only to be cut down before it could start a revolution. Andy Richter's show was too clever for its network, but our next entry was a brilliant parody of cheesy 80s action shows that was canceled before it even had a chance to air all its episodes. 17. Greg the Bunny.
Teddy, I will be in a play. You understand? Performing. I'm not opposed to eat the Legos. Oh, God, it's like talking to Keanu Reeves.
In the early 2000s, a sitcom arrived on Fox that featured a cast of humans interacting with a cast of foul-mouthed, existentially troubled puppets. This was Greg the Bunny, a show based on a public access series that followed the behind-the-scenes drama of a children's puppet show called Sweet Knuckle Junction. The main character was Greg, a naive rabbit puppet who gets a job on the show, only to discover the world of children's television is a dark and cynical place. His co-star, Warren the Ape, was a washed-up alcoholic monkey puppet who resented Greg's success. The show was a brilliant, hilarious, and often profane satire of Hollywood, starring Seth Green and Eugene Levy. It was supposed to be easy, until it wasn't. The show was a critical hit, but its bizarre premise and adult humor made it a tough sell for a mainstream audience. Fox aired the episodes out of order, confusing viewers, and then quickly canceled it. But everything changed in one moment when the show's creators refused to let it die. It was revived for a new season on the Independent Film Channel, and the character of Warren the Ape even got his own spin-off series on MTV, a testament to the show's enduring cult appeal. Greg the Bunny was too weird for network TV, but our next show was a smart and funny sitcom about sports reporters who couldn't find a stable home. 18th Sports Night.
If you're asking me for genuinely sophisticated analyses, and I sense that you are, you gotta give me some time, at least 20 minutes.
From the brilliant mind of Aaron Sorkin, the man who would later create The West Wing, came Sports Night, a sitcom set behind the scenes of a nightly cable sports news show. But this wasn't a show about sports. It was a show about the people who talked about sports. It was famous for Sorkin's signature rapid-fire, walk-and-talk dialogue, its brilliant ensemble cast including Peter Krause, Felicity Huffman, and Josh Charles. and its perfect blend of laugh-out-loud comedy and heartfelt drama. It was a show that was as smart as it was funny, a critical darling that was unlike any other sitcom on television. Nobody saw this coming, but its network, ABC, was completely baffled by it. They insisted on adding a laugh track to the show, a decision that Sorkin and the cast famously hated as it clashed with the show's naturalistic, single-camera style. The network also struggled to market it, unsure if it was a comedy or a drama. Despite winning multiple awards and developing a passionate fan base, the show struggled in the ratings and was canceled after just 2 seasons. It remains a beloved cult classic, a show that was ahead of its time and a powerful early example of the kind of intelligent, character-driven comedy that would later thrive on cable and streaming.